It's really a pleasure to have Deep here because in 2000 when MakeMyTrip launched, its catchy name, MakeMyTrip, caught the imagination of travelers across India. But clearly there was much more to MakeMyTrip than its name. The name was very catchy, but then that's the start. It has been a journey of almost 20 years, Deep, so great to hear your views, especially on how design influenced to MakeMyTrip and what is the path forward as far as the design of business and the business of design goes. So if you can figure that out. Sure. So we will of course try and pull up something very special from the archives, if we can call 19 years archives now. But let's start with something very basic. Back then in 2000, when we spoke of design, it was a lot to do with color, it was a lot to do with format. Clearly things have changed and evolved. For you as a person and an entrepreneur, how do you view good design back then and today?
Yeah, no, it's firstly a real pleasure to be here. Lots of familiar faces. I've met a lot of people who are ex-MakeMyTrip out here, which is bittersweet because I'm not quite sure why they left and why they're not coming back. So I'm going to make a pitch to all of them out here. If you're actually interested to come and spend your weekend out here, I have to tell you that the change from what the MakeMyTrip of yore, and you will see something out here from the archives, you're going to soon see our first version, 1.0 of MakeMyTrip.com on the home page, and I just managed to retrieve it. And where we've come now, which hopefully many of you are familiar with what we do, whether it's the desktop or the mobile device, the app, etc. So there's been a sea change, to put it mildly. And so to answer your question more specifically, I think initially we went about design with, I think with common sense. And the first approach was really first principles. And I don't think we had any design specialist with us in 2000. I don't think too many design specialists existed in 2000. They probably did in the US, a few of them, a bunch of them. But I recall struggling during our first 5 years. So first launch, and I'll wait till that gets pulled up. I think it's going to come onto Jay and Akash's mobile phones also, and Venki will send it for you. Yeah. So whenever you want, you can put it up, and we'll have some fun. But that's when you go about it from first principles, and first principles for a non-techie like me, and ironically the guys who were around me, we did have someone from tech who I think I realized after 1 year the specialization was database management. And so you go about it from first principles. We made several mistakes in the first 5 years. I would really lump our first 5 years, 2000, 2005, as our stumbling years, our years of I think asking ourselves the reason why we will last, why we will survive, what we will do, and going through the roughest times, because those of you who were around then, anyone who was not born in 2000? No, it's possible. Yeah, don't try that one on me. Something gives it away. Okay, so I, by the way, now go and speak at conferences, and I have induction meetings sometimes, and I've got people who put their hands up and they say, okay, we were in diapers in 2000, and that's the reality of life, so many generations. Anyway, most of you were very, very young in 2000. And so, the way to go about that was, in your mind, you had a site map. And there's a story to the name also. If we have time, I'll tell you the very interesting story to the name, how it almost didn't get named MakeMyTrip, and how users helped us name it MakeMyTrip. So if we have time, we'll talk about that, not really design, more branding. And so you have something in your mind as a founder, and then you've got to put it to paper, and then eventually to screen. And it was only the large format then. And you start sketching, you start drawing, which we call wireframes, we call whatever this thing. And then I'm interfacing all the time with this third party. And for the first 5 years, actually for the first 7 years, we outsourced development. Right. It's how silly were we, but that's what we did, because, okay, that's what we got.
All right, there it is.
This is really cool. So yeah, this is what it was. So I have to actually walk you through this. It gives me goosebumps. And I actually drew this thing. I remember many, many times and this is as good as I could get. We knew our offering. Interestingly, this is still what we do. So our first ever mission statement was the preferred place to be for Indians to travel from India, within India, and to India, for people to travel to, from, and within. And ironically, for the first 5 years, we focused on people coming to India. So US India, which was non-resident Indians, because Indians weren't ready to buy online. Not by purpose, by default. But then, thereafter, when we launched in India in 2005, it's all been about outbound and domestic travel. That was our booking engine. So our magic was right there. That was the booking engine. If you think about it, so much has changed, but yet so little has changed. In a sense, the logic doesn't change a lot. There was a login place, there was a destination guide, you still have it. We had travel stories. We had something even funnier when you go down. There was a spotlight of the week, which we call the hero shot now. You have carousels, you have various things going on. You have mouse overs now, it's just fancy, but that's exactly what we did. If you can just go down to the next one, cruises got replaced by interstate buses, I think, yeah. And further down, this is interesting too, so the best-selling fares, etc., the deals. Okay, there was something, we actually had a travel shop, we used to sell travel products. So it's really, really come a long way. But the reality is that I think design has evolved as a science and an art pretty dramatically over the last, I'd actually say 5 years. And for us, the big catch-up point really in our journey was when India and the world went mobile. Yeah. So we were playing catch-up all the time on desktop. I'm being completely candid with you, nothing to hide. We were playing catch-up. We would be looking around, who's doing a good job. We'd look at Expedia, we'd look at other sites. I was actually a big fan, and I admit it now, of actually ClearTrip, because I think ClearTrip was one of the first companies in India who got design. And there's no shame in admitting that, and I know them really well now, and thankfully for us, they didn't get business at all, but they got design very well. And I think we got more business, and then for us, our inflection point or our eureka moment came when India went mobile. So this is about, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, and I recall we had Rajan from Google had just joined in India, and Rajan came and he was telling us about Google searches on travel searches on Google, and he's saying, they have actually stagnated over the last 2 months. And this is like 4 or 5 years ago, and I froze. I said, but the market's just opening up. He says, Deep, this is fact, this is reality. You believe in data, I believe in data, this is what's happening. And it was a very scary proposition. But at the same time, what was happening was that mobile was taking off, apps were just about being popular born, and then we know what's happened in the last 4 years of mobile. So our business was 4 years ago, 100% desktop. Our business today is almost 75% comes from app, or from mobile, of which 90% comes from app. Our searches and traffic, probably in most of our lines of business, is actually, again, 75 to 80% all app. So we seized that moment and that opportunity as saying, we've got a fresh lease of life. We're not going to play catch up, and we're going to win on the app side. And the things we did, it just didn't happen automatically, because if we were that smart on app, why weren't we smart on desktop? I think we started investing in really top quality people for design. Way back in the day when we outsourced, I actually remember trying to find a design company, and finally we found someone in the US, a company, actually in Canada, I think called Nurun. Anyone familiar, N-U-R-U-N? Are they still around? They were cutting edge design then, and they were really expensive for us. We were a small company. We hired them, and I think they taught me design because just the way of thinking. So I never realized the science of design. There's clearly a right side of the brain of design, the fuzzy logic. So that's either, in my mind, that's intuitive. You either get it or you don't get it. You're either born with it or you're not born with it. You spend time in Stockholm, so you probably are surrounded by people who get design innately. But design comes in all hues. I mean, the Gond art of India is design, but it depends what you want to do. But if you want to talk about design on the online medium, I think it's a classic intersection of usability, which is science, and on the other side, design, which is, I think, non-science or fuzzy logic. And the two together is really UX, which is a beautiful culmination of the two. And that's how I look at it. So I realized the part we didn't have. We had plenty of the other side. We had some really fanatical users. I probably am, anal about things like this. My design team probably hates me, but probably at the end of the day, they say it's okay, because if they come to me with anything, sorry, it's going back and it's going back and it's going back. And I'm just obsessed with it, and I wish I could spend more time on it. So I think they've found the best thing is not to show him stuff, and it's just to go and launch it. But I have many colleagues around that. So around the same time, we had a very smart guy on product. We had Amit Somani. Many of you know, he's spoken at this conference a few years ago. Amit's now moved on, and he's a VC. He stayed with us for about 4 years. We have Anshuman Bapna. Again, some of you know, he's pretty popular in the product world. He worked with us in Gurgaon for a while. He's back in Bangalore. Phenomenal guy. So they have guys who actually could give leadership. And then we were fortunate enough also to get on design side. We got Jay to join us. Jay, what's it been, 2 years? Yeah, okay. So Jay came on board, and he's actually it's probably more than 2 years. 2 years of the merger, so it's actually been more, Jay.
Little over 2 years, maybe 2 years and a couple of months.
Okay. So, Jay was doing something very interesting. He had a practice. He'd worked overseas. He had a practice. Then he was working with a VC company, helping their portfolio. And we started working together, and I think we were fortunate to get him. And at the same time, guys like Akash and the team, we have actually the most talented guys are not Jay and Akash by far. The most talented guys are definitely the teams who work under them, but that's perfectly okay. What's smart about them is they get that, and they bring the best out of those teams. So I've worked with some of the young designers, and it's an absolute pleasure, because they're bristling with ideas. So long story short, I think we've become a hub now to get good people, get good people. Which we've all known. So I think we had never any trouble getting good people for business, or getting good people for marketing, or getting good people for travel or finance, any other functions. In tech and in design, we suffered for a while because we actually had outsourced it. So our turning point first was in 2007, where we said we're going to do this in-house, and we moved it in-house. And then the next turning point was really when the devices went mobile. Yeah. And I think that's when people saw, hey, they got someone working there, doing good stuff, interesting stuff, this whole community out here, and probably, maybe 100,000 people like you out there in India, maybe 1 million now, somewhere between that number, actually care about design and get, titillated, for lack of a better word, when you see good design. And that's the kind of thing I think we've managed to change. And we want to make it, we want to take it notches and notches higher. So we're really pushing. Our latest one actually came from a non-design guy again, a gentleman called Vipul, who's just joined us as COO after 20 years in Pepsi, super successful, very bright, not for product or tech. He's joined us for business and marketing and everything else. And he came to me last week and he said, I have to tell you something. We really, really suck at overall, and that's how we talk to each other, but with full respect. He said, we don't have a common language. We just don't have a common brand language across. He's saying we're making these great ads, and probably all of you enjoy our ads, and they're doing really well, whether it's Ranveer and Alia doing MakeMyTrip ads, or it's, we've got Deepika doing something for Go-Ibibo. You'll see her again during IPL. He said we do a great job there. We do a good job, decent job on print. We do nice work online. But then our content and everything else, there are 10 ways or 20 ways we are touching the customer. There's no common thread. And I gave him a hug. I said, Vipul, this is music to my ears. I agree with you. It's become too big a monster now for me to handle alone. I totally agree. So we're going to drive now through our marketing folks, our content team, actually a common thread and a common design. And design's going to be the hub where it'll go through. And you've already heard about it, Jay, that everything, any time where you touch any of our brands, you'll see a consistency. So I think our thinking has evolved a lot. So my answers are very long, but the others will be very short.
So it does. I also sense a job offer for some of these guys who are sitting
totally.
here. So
I mean it. I can't tell you. And I work very closely with few teams. So I have no one, I think, pretty much reporting to me now. And even the guys who report to me don't really report to me, a few people. So Rajesh pretty much runs the company per se on a day-to-day basis. But the teams I love to get involved in, I'm still working full-time. I love to get involved with our actually content, our actually design, our actually marketing. I think they're the three things which come to me intuitively. I get business completely and product, but I think business completely, but there are guys who get it even better than me. not only Rajesh, the other people. So there's little point in wasting your energies there. So I'm trying to spend more and more time on this, and I just absolutely love it.
So you are looking at sort of one language for MakeMyTrip across platforms,
and ditto for Go-Ibibo has actually done a better job,
right,
because they are a younger company, they're a more compact company, and they've had the luxury of one actually tech leader and leadership team from the beginning. We've not had that luxury. We've had many kind of generations,
right.
But while you and I were chatting, I was calling actually our first head of technology, and he's the guy who sent this across, and he said, of course I've got it, and so it's great, but then the team has morphed a lot.
Okay. How are you seeing this as a competitive advantage when it comes, how are you seeing design as a competitive advantage when it comes to other travel websites? And how much of the investment of business strategy, both in terms of time, energy, and resources would go into the design?
I think design and UX has become a bigger competitive advantage today than it ever was, because of the capability that today's technologies afford. And I'll explain that. So earlier on, I think the difference could be incremental, and people would tilt more towards functionality. And for a while, let's keep this whole deals thing away, right? So when there's deals, of course, it's like you say, what's the most important thing in travel? And the three most important things people say are price, price, price. And that's what comes out on research. So let's put that aside, because it won't last forever. I mean, that's pretty much the froth of a beer when you pour it in a glass. I mean, at some point in time, it's going to settle. It will settle. But then why people choose one brand over another? It's been proven so many times. It's because of other factors. Take aside price. It's actually, in travel, it's because of reliability. Reliability is just huge, which is that when I show up at the airport, this works. What's on my mobile, or if I've taken a printout, I still do that, whatever, this works. There'll never be an issue. When I show up at the hotel and I check in, this works. When I take a bus overnight from Chennai to Bangalore, this works. And you get that reliability in your mind that this is going to work. The same thing which you give today to some airlines and you don't give to the others. You understand weather. The same thing which you don't give to Indian Railways. Most of us who travel by train know that, except the Shatabdi, there are not too many trains you can depend on to go on time. That's the reality. So you said this ain't going on time. So now that's why you have a whole genre of websites to help you track your train. It's actually quite bizarre, but that's the reality, right? There's no weather there by and large, except when there's heavy fog. So I think reliability is something which gets kind of reinforced on each experience or gets killed. And you think about it, all the brands that you gravitate towards in travel or otherwise are brands you can count on at the end of the day. It's the same for running shoes. It's the same for jeans. It's the same for inexpensive food. It's the same for a hotel brand, a chain that you go for. It's the same for movie halls. It's the same for chai and coffee. That's the reality of life. I mean, you just gravitate, and it's not so much, at least for this audience, and I would say for the top 30 million of India, not 300 million. I don't believe that number. I think McKinsey has been telling us this bullshit number for the longest time, but India has about 100 million people who are ready to buy online today. That's it. That's the reality. Not more than 100 million, but that's a big number in itself. Let's do a good job of 100 million. Of that 100 million, no more than a quarter to a third really care about design. That's the reality. They don't. The people who actually care about design, not surprisingly, are the people who are actually also fairly price insensitive given a certain price band. Given a certain, like 5-10%. They're not going to change their loyalties just because something is 10 or 50 rupees or even 100 rupees cheaper. They're going to say, no, it's good. But so I consider that the most important and the most exciting part of India, who actually says, I will accord more points to reliability, and I see the intersection with design. The other things which matter out there are, if something goes wrong, this company will take care. And we figured that out by mistake. And we realized our board, I remember for the longest time, we had two Yanks on the board. One of them had worked for Expedia for many years. And he would keep saying, don't worry about customer service. The best of companies don't care about this. I said, no, Fred, this is India. People care about this. It matters. And he would give me examples of Expedia, how they found no difference whether they cut customer service from 1,000 people to 300 people or whatever. And I said, no, it's going to be different. Today we can automate it, but we actually invested in customer service as a business strategy. I think mine did, and a few other guys, blood boiled when we saw things going wrong, because it can go horribly wrong. So we said we want to take care. And I think over time, when we poll our customers, we found that people see this brand as being someone who cares if something goes wrong. And things can go wrong not because of you, but we are an intermediary. So our small hotel up in the hills with 20 rooms, you've driven out there, you've reached in the evening, there's no other hotel, or everything's sold out. You could be sold out because they overbooked by mistake or whatever. They're not using a fancy system. What do you do? How are you going to take care of that customer? So I think people also accord a lot of importance to brands who genuinely care. And I think we figured that out. So we want to be that. I think we're probably 7 on 10, but we're on our journey, and the amount of importance we're giving to post-sales right now is actually probably more than sales, because we believe that's how companies become golden. And then come the other softer and interesting aspects of convenience. Convenience is probably third, again, after price. Then are these three things. So people who genuinely care would be probably number 5, number 4 would be reliability, and number 6 would be how convenient is it to make a booking and get done. And that's where all of this comes together. So I think there are about 20 to 30 million people in India who care. And we are excited about getting that audience and getting hopefully 100% of their wallet share.
Right.
And we believe their competitive advantage will come only because we make it so convenient.
Right. That is a huge number. It is, I mean,
Yeah.
if I can give the context of Sweden, it
coming
is
from
3
Scandinavia,
Swedens.
yeah, exactly. It's all of Scandinavia probably, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So as today, as an entrepreneur, also a mentor for the company, and other peers, sort of the C-suite, what do they expect of designers? Gone are the days where it was just about wireframes and color, but how much of an involvement in actually decision making is with the designers, and because you are creating a team that is actually looking into design, being a part of MakeMyTrip in a very big way.
Yeah, I can't speak for the whole C-suite, but I can tell you some of us, definitely the product heads, the tech folks, myself. I think what we are looking for design now is to play a role to take us from the proverbial good to great. And for me, that's still probably the best management book of all times, by the way. It's not so much about design, but it's more about process and how you get. But I can, stretch that analogy to design. And how do you go from being just a good design company to great? And I think we are hoping for that, and it's great when we get blown away and we see stuff like that. And why I spoke about our younger designers is because I think they're very bold and they're ready to try new things out of the bucket. They also very innately reject copy. So, they think it's infra dig. Yeah. And I just love that, because they're saying, just because, sure, I've scanned the environment, I've seen everything out there, and this works, yeah, but guess what? Let me genuinely meditate on this, ruminate on this, spend my weekend on this, close my eyes, let me come back with something, this is fresh. So I think that's so true for any creative person, right? So designers are creative people, most of you out there, and I think it's not very flattering if you pick something up and use the same thing. But that's the way many of us business guys think on design. We're saying, yeah, we'll be new on innovative business models. We'll do this. We'll do a nice marketing campaign which has never been done before. But I don't think we have the capability on design. So for lack of a better thing, I will be pointing out and saying, listen, I love this, what Airbnb does or Uber does or whatever. I really like this, or even Booking.com, we'd say, they do this well. But that doesn't mean we copy that. And I think the smart guys and gals, they go back and they say, okay, let me figure out an even better way. What's your end goal? So I think the smartest designers, I expect them to push back hard on business and product and to say, so what's the end goal? And the end goal is always the same. The end goal is actually conversion to the next page, conversion to the next click. That's it. That is the end goal, right? Or engagement or all. They're all in the same sphere of conversion, engagement, stickiness. It's actually different facets of the same thing. And we are all searching for that gold. And basically what a designer is saying, if I put one pixel out there in a different shade, I would love it to get noticed. Reality is it won't get noticed by everyone, it'll get noticed by some. But if you can move the needle a little bit also, you're onto something. And the smart designer should be able to pick up those signs, make an analytical model out of it, and say, hey, guess what? I have an A-B framework. We allow people to play on A-B all the time. Please experiment, do whatever you want on X percentage of traffic, whether it's 1 or half or whatever it is, depending on the line of business. Look at the signs. The data will tell you over time if this is working or it ain't working. But I think we expect boldness, we expect originality, we expect creativity, and we expect actually radical approach. That's what I'm looking at on the great ones. On the good ones, we expect just flawless execution. So I think it depends. It's actually up to the people again,
right,
of where they want to be. There are many people who are happy to be told what to do. They'll execute very well, and that's fine too. But then there are many people who will say, listen, no, I'm going to actually come back with something wow. And also internally, we have a big design team now, and these guys are like, always internally there's a buzz going on. They're discussing stuff. They're building on each other's ideas, which is how it'll happen. I think we have to really treat them differently. There's a far more, I think there's much more latitude, there's much more kind of freedom. And there has to be, because it's an art. Like I don't think anyone produced a work of art when they were given a time frame and said, okay, do something incredible which the world has never seen, but guess what, you got to deliver this in 3 weeks. It ain't going to happen.
Interesting point that you are raising, because I would like you to talk a little more about that. Design is, design as you say, or designers, they are like artists, but at the same time you've got to run a business. So where do you see is the expectation versus the ground reality between designers and say the management team? How much of a sort of a friction is there, and how much of are they actually in sync?
No, absolutely. Exactly, you said it right. The word, I guess there can be healthy friction, and I guess you need to create that. I really think it's the job of product and it's the job of business to get the best. I don't think it's the job of design to do that. The job of design is to deliver the best, but then the communication gap has to be ensured that it's minimal. And that'll only happen if you make this iterative. If you don't make it iterative, you say, okay, this is what we want, this is what we're looking for, come back in 3 weeks, they'll come back in 3 weeks, and then you say, oh no, this is not what I wanted at all. I think we all know that the more iterative you do that, there are managers who actually do stand-up daily meetings on stuff, which is wow. But those are 15-minute catch-ups, sync-ups. But at the minimum, you want to make sure you do it every few days or even once a week, so that you're not going off a tangent. And by the way, we do that, I do that even today, which is, it's just about gauging expectations. So what do you want? Because if I'm not delivering what you want to my investors or to some of the other folks I work with, then I'm off a tangent. I'm wasting the most precious thing we all have in our lives, which is time. And that's why I was keen to sync up with you yesterday, which we couldn't do, but we caught up for 10 minutes, and that was enough to know what you want out of this. And Jay and Akash had given me a flavor of what they want out of this, and the rest otherwise is, I don't want to waste everyone's time, and neither do I want to waste my time. So I think it's really important that we kind of keep making it iterative, keep going back, keep checking, is this where we are heading? I'm trying to do something, or give me a week and let me come back. So the job to manage that, I think, responsibility lies with product.
Right, and you had given, you were talking about a competitor as well, but does the good design necessarily translate into good business?
So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I think it should, but automatically it won't. It's not going to just do it. Like, you'll see some really incredible design. Like, if I was to ask you guys, rate your 10 favorite websites in the world, or on design, probably none of them are great business sites, but they're just intuitively so cool, so wow. Like, in travel, I might say Condé Nast Traveler for whatever reason, or something like that, and I say I just love it. I used to love a site called, I think it was called away.com. I love Jet Setter. I love these kind of sites. I don't think any of them are great businesses on travel, but they get something. Yeah. So that job, that bridge, and to ensure that will happen, that's what I'm saying. That responsibility lies with product folks, which lies with business folks, to rein it in. Is to say, guys, this is beautiful, but then guess what? Let's go look at the numbers now. Let's see, has this improved for us? And that's why I mentioned AB platform, because it's very hard to compare apples to oranges, because there could be a sale fair going on from some airlines right now. So everything's improving, all boats are rising. So therefore AB is the only way to test it. Say, okay, take a month. But after a month, has this actually helped us in our end goal? Like you said, we're here to run a business, we're not here to win awards. I tell my marketing guys all the time, for every good ad film that you see, there are 9 crappy ones. I see 2 average ones, but our CMO sees, maybe 9 crappy ones. And then he filters that down, it comes down to 3, then we see 3, then we like the scripts. And, some work, some don't. Some are great films. Like I thought 1 or 2 of them are like great ad films, but they didn't move the needle on business. And, we're scratching our heads why, but they could have won us an award. Like one of our best ad films had this Nasiruddin Shah voice, and it was the love of travel, and it was just amazing. And as you would realize, it ended up being an indie film, which clearly didn't win the box office. So we're here to run a business. We have to, get conversions up and eventually make money, get more stickiness, get more repeat rate. So I'm not putting dollar and rupee pressure on it, but I'm putting definitely engagement and repeat pressure on it. Right. I love those 2 metrics, and they're also linked. For me, repeat is everything. Today, in a very weird sort of way, I love telling marketing folks, like imagine tomorrow all marketing was banned. And with the way laws are coming out, who knows? Okay, so tomorrow e-commerce laws change, so tomorrow all marketing monies are banned. It'll be awesome, right? We should win. But we'll win even bigger, and we'll save a lot of money. We'll be hugely profitable because most of our money is spent on marketing. We have 40 million people who have transacted with us. Now, if we don't do a good job of those 40 million people, then we have no right to go to the next 4 million people. So let's at least first do a really good job of that. So I think the thinking has to be like that. Are we giving the best to customers who have given us the opportunity to delight them? Or are we just bouncing them off, giving them an average experience? They're not coming back. Are we actually doing that? And then let's turn on the marketing tap. So otherwise, and this applies for every business, otherwise we have no right actually to spend even $1 or 1 rupee in marketing money. Let's first delight each and every person who's there. That's the way it should be. The reality of business is there's pressures. We're a listed company, we have a quarter-to-quarter pressure, we've got to do all of that kind of stuff. Right. So we're trying to kind of work both things in tandem, but all along we're trying to say, engagement, repeat, stickiness, repeat. Like let's make that happen. That's the virtuous circle. Right. Anyone can spend a lot of money and bring them in. Once you spend a lot of money and bring customers in, if you don't delight them, it's a double whammy. Right?
So you spoke about customer experience. There's also more and more most companies as well as designers headed towards immersive experiences. How does MakeMyTrip look at that when it comes to design and when it comes to the company?
I don't think we've done that much on the immersive side. On AI, I can talk where we've done much, but immersive, I can give you a hint onto the way we're thinking about it. On AI, actually, I think, again, our serious investments went in around the same time, about a couple of years ago. The proof of that out there is we've got 2 chatbots that are actually doing a really good job for both brands. MakeMyTrip has got Myra and Go-Ibibo's got Gia. Both are now taking care of between 10 to 20% of all customer post-sales interactions. Right. The goal there is 90%, and it should be because it's known. People are only asking the same things. That universe of things they're asking is no more than 100. Every now and then one new one will come and you'll still have someone for taking care of that. And then it's a learning system because that should get looped in. That's your learning. If people ask something which has never been asked before, which is, which is the cord I pull when I'm on the parachute, something like that, it might come up, who knows. But otherwise it's, I want to change my ticket, I want to cancel my ticket, my room reservation, I want to add this, I want to do that, and all is 100, no more than 100, that's it. And we know everything about the customer, so we can train and we can do that. Now we're trying to use our bots for pre-sales. And I saw some really cool interfaces which are conversational. So it's no surprise that India is a chat country. And we have, I think, 250 million people WhatsApp as users, something like that. It's crazy. It's almost 300 million, something like that. So why won't our interfaces be chat-like? Why won't we approach the next 100 million people, beyond 100, who might actually, believe it or not, be intimidated by the current interfaces? they find this very complicated. And the counter I get to that is, but an uneducated taxi driver can figure out Uber and Ola. Yes, he can, and he can because he makes a livelihood out of that. It's very different. For him, it's a livelihood, it's utilitarian. He's figured it out because he has to, he has to pick the ride, he makes money. He figures it out literally in few days. And his cousin teaches him, who's from the same village, and they get done, and they manage. But we've all been in cab drivers where they're struggling with the language, and they're actually asking you, but you learn because that's livelihood. Where it's not utilitarian and it's not livelihood, it doesn't come intuitively. So there we could look at the approach very, very differently, and AI could be actually the way to go about it. So we could welcome you in and say, and you're not the target audience, but let's say there's someone who comes from a tier 3 city. Interestingly, there's a lot of wealth in tier 2 and tier 3 today, but people are socially underconfident. They're not rustic, there's a difference. So you can call it rich and rustic, but actually the right way to term them is well off, but socially underconfident. Far more comfortable in their own language, in the vernacular. Also far more comfortable chatting, but they're still chatting. So why won't we go about that? And why won't the first question to them be when they come on, जाना कहाँ है, क्या करना चाहते हैं, किधर छुट्टी करनी है या काम से जा रहे हैं? Why can't it be, sorry folks, but it's all about really where do you want to go, what do you want to do, is this a work trip, is this a leisure trip? And people don't mind because the answers are yes, no, literally. What's your budget, again, in their language. Why couldn't it be? People said voice, and I don't think voice will work for multiple different reasons because voice alone won't work, and even I guess Alexa's figured that out because results are very hard to comprehend on voice. How many results are you going to give? The mind wants to actually compare, and therefore the mind wants to see. So I think AI, the possibilities are just incredible in our business. We believe there's a role for immersive. We believe that millennials, many of them out here, and Gen Z, and none of them out here, if you didn't put your hand up for that, are actually getting impacted much more today by neutral third parties, very highly curated kind of, I'd say, interfaces. So the single biggest reason why this generation is traveling is actually Insta. So Instagram is the biggest reason they are getting, or rather what's influencing their travel, which means their friends, which means social, which means what they're seeing out there, not websites like ours. Websites like ours are then being used to come and make the booking. Now we'd like to take that position, but it probably won't happen so easily. So therefore we've got to, I think, have a strategy around where can we get people at least seed ideas, and then let's first get people excited about the beauty of travel. Not everyone gets it. And then you say, wow, this is really cool, and I'd love to travel, love to go there, and now figure out where to go. So I think we've got to do work on the immersive side. But it's something I'm personally excited about, and we've been talking about it, which we call inspirational travel, or inspiring travel. So I think inspiring travel is also our job. It might not happen under the same brands. It might happen under a totally different brand. And it'll be a very organic growth out there. It'll be very, very user-generated. But I think it's going to really help the way people, the next generation, is going to book their travel. It's fundamentally different from the way we guys think about it. Or at least I'm 49.
That's true. Yeah. That is true. And a lot of youngsters out here perhaps will understand.
They travel differently. They stay differently. Villas, homestays, full, this thing is being preferred all the time. We just did our first ever consumer lab, a series of consumer labs on Gen Z. We were ignoring Gen Z. We thought it stopped at millennials. There's actually Gen Z, and we have to understand their mind and how they're thinking. So for me, what's exciting is every time I interact with young people in the company or otherwise, because they think very, very differently. It's of course, they want to spend all the money they have and more, what they don't have also on travel. So here's a really cool story. I do a monthly meetup with all new joinees. So my last monthly meetup was last week. And I have a group, and my favorite question to ask them is how many breaks, leisure breaks, including a weekend holiday, did you take in the last year? So during 2018, I asked these guys how many, and I have to encourage them, like, more is good. It's okay because we are a travel company. We love the fact that you're traveling. And normally the mean mode and all is about 5 to 6, which is not bad. Sometimes occasionally, 3 months ago, someone had put up a hand, a lady had said 12, and I said, wow, that's interesting. Last last one, last week. A girl kept keeping her hand up in the first row. She kept keeping her hand up. I said, more than 10, hand is still up. More than 15. I said, how many trips did you take? I said, did you understand the question? She said, yeah. How many trips did you take? She said, 25.
Wow.
And I said, are you kidding me? I'm not talking about work trips, because work trips, I know many guys who take 52, literally, like they're off every Monday to Bombay, Bangalore, come back every this. She said, all work. She said, I got married last year. I said, okay, how many honeymoons would that be? She said, no, all the trips were not with my partner. And I've actually asked her to send a list. So I said, are you including like this trip outside Delhi to Damdama and all? She said, oh, I'm not even counting those.
Wow.
So I said, wow, what were you doing? She said, we both love travel and we hope we can keep that going even this year. And by the way, we also have a policy, another pitch to join, of unlimited leaves. So think about it. And 3 guys said, we love that. So
Can we apply?
yeah, so this girl has done 25 trips. And that's, I know so many people who are saying, like, listen, every time we have a long weekend or a short weekend, we'd love to take off, plus that long holiday, plus that this thing. That's the way it is. And they want to spend, she says, we save up to do that. She's obviously doing reasonably okay. Her husband, I don't know what he does, probably doing well. And they're saying we save up to travel. That's the only thing we want to splurge on, going out, eating out and traveling. It's the renting economy. No one wants to, like when we grew up, it was save, save, save till you could buy your first car and then plan for your first house. And that was your whole deal. This is the renting economy. They're saying neither of those are important today. So which is great.
It's fantastic. And we can take it.
My trip in 2000. So I believe at that point of time, it was an idea of future. And in those times where startup was not the thing and there were not a lot of investors, how did you push yourself, like keep going, keep going? Probably money was drying up, there were a lot of things happening, but again, you have to push yourself, and there wasn't a lot of funding going on the startup eco-culture, probably that's what I feel.
Right.
So how did you just push yourself? Like if we build a technology today, what would you suggest to the Gen Z? Why should we just keep going? Like, I know you need to keep going, but actionable thing.
I think I get the question, and you know, while it's been, I think, written to death, but I'll still tell you. Honestly, it would be very hard to do the same thing, to do it today. I think it's about phase of life. It's of course about, the most important thing is conviction in idea, and it has to be something that you completely believe, whether design, idea, whatever, is going to win. But then again, you've got to back it up with some degree of validation. And in data we trust. So for me, it was always the validation was coming out of data. The validation was that I believe this is awesome, and so do a few of my colleagues. I had a band of colleagues who really, really believed this would work. But the validation was that week on week, we were actually improving, albeit really incrementally, but we were improving. So I think it's the combination of the two. And then you got to have, I think, age or stage in life, whatever you want to call it, age on your side, where if you're 30, which is when, what I was, just short of 30 when I started MakeMyTrip, you basically have to, I think, you know, not throw in the towel too early. I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think some of the best businesses don't see light of day because people give up too early. So you got to really ask yourself, what's my end goal? Am I going to just try this out for a year or two, and then if it works, it's great? I think in India, it still takes 4 to 5 years to even see green shoots of a decent business. It's getting faster. So,
how do you think the travel experience will change in next 5 years? Like 20 years before when you started, there were no online bookings. Then online bookings came.
Yeah.
And in 2008, Airbnb launched, and they did homestays in 10 years. Now people are comfortable with homestays, and in fact, they love it more than hotel.
Yeah.
So what do you believe will happen in next 5 or 10 years?
yeah, it's
Like,
a beautiful question, and I think what you asked about immersive travel is going to be the booking part of it. But see, travel is one of those things which hopefully will still stay bodily experiential. And I say hopefully because there are guys who are challenging that with augmented reality, with virtual reality. People are just saying, okay, you can feel like you've been there and done that. And that'll be so sad in a sense, but who knows? I'm not a futurist, but it could. But I'm at least saying in the near foreseeable future, let's say 10 years. So I think in 10 years' time, people are going to actually travel much more. Getting from place A to place B world over, and particularly in India, is getting much, much easier. I don't know if you guys read about, obviously you've read about the bullet train coming to India, but did you read about this crazy thing on Tube travel, not Hyperloop, tube travel, which someone's trying in Australia, which might get you from Canberra to Melbourne, they said in 10 minutes. I read it just yesterday, and I mean, that's mind-boggling at $167 or something, which seemed crazy, and they said it'll be a reality in 5 years or something. So I think it's just going to fundamentally become much easier to get from place A to place B. Cheaper and easier. The cost of travel in India has actually come down dramatically to what it was. So going to Goa now, on the average, except at peak time, is 5,000 rupees. It was never less than 10,000 rupees 5 to 10 years ago. So it gets cheaper. It gets cheaper to stay because of homestays and other options. And if you're not looking at 5-star comfort, I think one of the best changes that's going to happen is people actually looking at it on a carbon footprint point of view. I think a lot of people are getting conscious about this. I have to thank all of you who have very consciously given us those 5 rupees when you make a booking on MakeMyTrip. Just 2 weeks ago, we shared that corpus grew and grew and grew. We worked with an NGO in Rajasthan in a very poor district, and we planted 1 million trees coming from that 5 rupees. It really, really shows the power of many becoming the power of money, and that keeps going. So I think people are caring, and they're going to care even more about their carbon footprint when they travel. And therefore, you'll find a lot more of in nature-friendly travel. So you're going to find people saying, let's do stuff in the outdoors, but let's be conscious. Yes, we've traveled here, we've created a carbon footprint. How can I offset that? But also, when I travel, do I really, really have to, stay in this very luxurious place? Can I stay in something which is more in touch with nature, etc.? I think the focus has already changed, but it's going to be more about not where you're going, but what you're doing. I think that's true for this generation. People are really bothered about what are you doing when you're there, not where you're going. So it's that activity which is becoming far more important, and it's that memory. So it's I think getting far more real. While Indians, many of us are first-time travelers overseas, we're still checking the boxes, and we are still saying, okay, I have to go and pay my respects, and literally go to do the Dubai and do the Singapore and do the cities. But then there are a lot of people now who are already saying, listen, I want to not backpack necessarily, but I'm happy to land up in Europe and then rent a car or take a Eurail pass and go to smaller cities and stay outside and be in touch with nature. That's already happening. So that's probably not the future. Yeah. I think these 3 or 4 trends, I can see them happening already. Alternate stays and homestays. Also, I think people are going to want to spend a lot more time, again, what you do with locals of places. So, buy locals and stuff like that's going to become huge, where people are going to say, let me, Vikrant's here from MakeMyTrip. He loves traveling and doing a very interesting kind of travel. He's off for a trekking thing for a month. But he's actually, and we work closely together, so he's actually probably going to be the kind of person, and many of you, who's going to host people from other places and be their guest in other places. So actually the good old days of exchange programs with students, that's going to become a way to travel. It's actually far more cheaper, but then the game might be of finding the right host, and it's so much more fulfilling if you can stay in a host's house for a few days or a week and eat with them and travel with them. And even if they're busy working and they're saying, this is what you're doing today, come back in the evening and we'll talk about what you did, and this is what you want to do tomorrow. I would love to do that, so long as someone could tell me this is the right kind of host. And also give me a neat, clean room with a neat, clean loo. That's all I want. But the rest of it, actually tell me this is how you need to go. You don't need to actually, spend on cabs and whatever. This is your pass, and off you go. I think we're going to see that a lot, which is very exciting. So more social.
Right. Thanks so much, Deep. You're talking about sustainable, immersive, travel of the future, and clearly design will also have a great role to play in that. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Can we hear it for Deep? He's given us very interesting insights into travel.